Okay, guys. I want to first say we set a record today for the most people logged in. We only have 2 people absent today. So congratulations. And how many in class? We had 10 in class. We had 11. Anyway, today we're talking about barriers to international trade. For those of you that already read chapter 1.5 that I assigned on Monday, then this will all just be review for you for the most part. Okay? So here we go, barriers to international trade. So first is tariffs. Tariffs are referred to as the most common type of trade barrier. They affect all of us. It's a tax imposed, It's a tax imposed by the local government on goods or services coming into a country. So essentially tariffs increase the price of imported product or service in the local market. So the purpose of the tariff is to protect domestic businesses from inexpensive imports. So an example would be like if a manufacturer in Canada made a shirt for 20 bucks, they'd mark the shirt up for a retail cost of $40 or $45 so that they could make a profit. But a manufacturer from Thailand that could produce the shirt quite more economically for say $10 and still mark up the shirt by $20 or $25, they'd have a final selling price of $30 or $35, which would undercut our local business. So obviously any savvy consumers would opt to buy the less expensive shirt, which leaves the Canadian manufacturer unable to compete. So this is why tariffs are put in place by local governments to protect those local businesses. Okay, a lot of us have heard of the term duty as opposed to a tariff when you come across the border with goods purchased in the United States, for instance. Duty and tariff are both forms of taxes imposed by the government on goods which are imported from other countries, and they're sometimes the words are sometimes used interchangeably. I guess the difference would be, well, if you a tariff helps protect the domestic industry in the market of a country by restricting the amount of goods traded and generates revenue for the government, whereas a duty is an indirect tax, which is again imposed by the government of a country to protect the domestic industries and also generates revenue. So they are basically a consumer tax on goods imported from other countries. So duty is more the tax itself, and the tariff is, the duty is paying the tax. Okay, so trade quotas. An import quota is a limit on the quantity of good that can be produced abroad and sold domestically. So again, it protects local producers by restricting the physical amount of good that can be imported internationally. So any good that can be produced locally will be protected by placing import quotas so that only a specific or a limited amount of that same good can be produced abroad and still sold domestically. So it's used to benefit the producers of a good in a domestic economy at the expense of the consumers of the good in that economy. Jokes?
What?
Okay, then trade embargoes. An embargo is a restriction placed on all trade between two nations. Often has a political agenda. So the most commonly referred to embargo that you may be familiar with is the United States embargo against Cuba on all commercial, economic, and financial goods or services. Okay, next barrier to trade is currency fluctuations. So fluctuations in the value of currency. So currency is defined as currency exchange is defined as the rate given by one country for another country's currency. So it's determined by international banks exchanging with other international foreign banks in large volumes of foreign currency. So the rates given during those trades, that is what sets the current daily exchange rate for the two countries. Get it?
Yeah.
So the fluctuating value of currency on international markets can be a major barrier to trade. So some of the biggest issues in international trade when it comes to currency fluctuations are when Canadian dollars are weak, as in our current situation, the foreign country's currency has more buying power here. So this, of course, means our exports will increase as Canadian products become less expensive for those foreign consumers or companies. Secondly, one of the risks of currency fluctuations would be in international trade is that if our dollar loses value in comparison to a country we've agreed to do business with, the products will become suddenly more expensive as a result. So for example, at Canada's current exchange rate, an agreement to make purchases from the US over extended period of time threatens to wipe out any profit realized because the relative price increases in Canadian currency. So say a year ago, there was an agreement put in place between a Canadian and a US company or a US supplier to exchange $2 million of certain goods. Well, if that agreement was made when our dollar was at par with the United States dollar, when our dollar loses value and worth only, say, 70 cents, and it costs us $1.50 to purchase any $1 worth of American good, then that $2 million suddenly becomes $3 million. It now costs us $3 million to get that same $2 million. And if our profit margin was only that same 50%, that's wiped out any profit that we may have realized, right? So at today's rate, it would cost $1.34. That's literally at today's rate to buy a single US dollar. So that's actually come down in the past 3 weeks. We were up to $1.50. So in other words, a Canadian dollar is only worth 74 cents US today. And to keep updated, here's where the current live rates can be found. That's to the minute. And you can compare any dollar to any other currency, any Canadian dollar to any currency at this website here. Okay, investment regulations is another trade barrier. So the Investment Canada Act, or the ICA, reviews the investment and or acquisition of Canadian businesses over $5 million. So whenever a Canadian business is acquired or invested in for $5 million or more, they can be reviewed and they can be denied that application, investment, or acquisition because of what it may do to the local economy. So if the value of the investment is over $5 million and a country is not part of the World Trade Organization, that's when the acquisition or investment will be reviewed. If the company is part of the World Trade Organization, it will not be reviewed unless it is a business that A, produces uranium and owns an interest in our uranium property. These are caveats to that regulation. B, it provides any financial service, it provides any transportation service, or it is a cultural business. You can read more in depth into these in, as I said, chapter 1.5 in your textbook. But you won't be tested on anything more specific than this, for sure. But these are, again, sorry, these are just examples of investment regulations. So these would be for Canadians importing goods or other countries exporting goods, because this is just the Investment Canada Act, right? This has nothing to do with our exports. But other countries do have similar acts and regulations put in place to help or support their own local economies. Okay, environmental restrictions. It's another barrier to trade. So all food, plants, animals, etc., must meet standards to protect foreign insects and diseases from coming into the country. You may have seen something that looks like this little sign here I've got on the slide. So avoid fines and delays by declaring all fruits, vegetables, plants, meat, and live animals. So as an example, just Canada's economy depends on its natural resources, and restrictions are put in place to protect these industries. So foreign insects and diseases could destroy entire industries in Canada and seriously harm the Canadian economy. So that's why these restrictions are put in place. Foreign relations and trade sanctions. So trade sanctions are limitations or restrictions of trade with the targeted country. So a trade embargo would be an example of a trade sanction. These include, Canada has an obligation to follow any trade sanctions imposed by the UN. And some of the reasons why trade sanctions or embargoes would be placed on certain countries, limiting or restricting trade, would be if there were human rights abuses or issues, terrorism, smuggling, slavery, war, those types of reasons. These sanctions are usually put in place to influence those policies or the policies, or actions of another country. There's two other acts in Canada that can be used to impose trade sanctions. That's the Special Economic Measures Act and the Export and Import Permits Act. Those are mentioned in the text as well under foreign relations. Anyway, those are examples of foreign relations and trade sanctions and what they are. So this is a graphic that I found for US sanctions. You can have a look at this here. Obviously, right here you see the Cuban one, the U.S. Cuba embargo, trade embargo, which covers almost all imports, exports, and financial transactions. That includes travel, obviously, travel companies going in and out of Cuba. Doesn't happen in the U.S. They're loosening those restrictions right now. I mentioned that earlier in the course, just as early as these past few months. Anyway, here's a graphic you can look at. It's the United States, but it's interesting nonetheless. Okay, so some safety regulations. So the Canadian government makes laws to protect Canadians, as you know. So there's several acts in place that all domestic companies and imports must follow. The Food and Drugs Act, Weights and Measures Act. There's a number of them. They're all in your textbook, or there's a lot of them in your textbook. There's a Meat Inspection Act, Consumer Packaging and Labeling, Fish Inspection, Hazardous Products. So imported food must be as safe as domestic food, just as an example. They have to be put under the same regulations as any domestic company. So products brought into Canada for resale have the same packaging and labeling requirements as well as domestic products. So anyway, those regulations are put in place to protect Canadians and Canadian business. Immigration policies. So Immigration Canada regulates the admission of visitors, immigrants, and refugees. These policies can act as a trade barrier since our economy needs laborers to produce goods and services. So visitors, of course, anyone coming for short stays like tourists, students, or foreign workers, offshore migrant workers. Immigrants, so people wishing to relocate to Canada from their home country. And of course, refugees, people that have fled their country to escape prosecution or war. Okay, that's pretty well it for trade barriers today. So the last slide is just what you need to do. So number 1, complete activity number 7 and assignments. I decreased the number of things we have to do for activity 7. There's one short, like 2-paragraph assignment, and then a couple of discussions. Okay, activity 7 content covers those 6 trade barriers. I think there are 6 or 7 trade barriers I had there. They're a little less in-depth as the slide presentation, but they're all the same barriers. And again, you'll see them covered in chapter 1.5. So if you haven't yet read chapter 1.5, have a look. That's page 28 to 34 of your textbook. Remember, we're playing Kahoot at 8:30. So log in at 8:30. Make sure to I'll have the game pin at 8:30. And respond to your email. I sent an email to everyone in the class, and I've heard back from 3 people. Yes. Yes. Then respond to my email. Yes. I want everyone in the class to respond to my email. It also proves to me you know where the email is. Pardon? Yeah. You'll find your email in the top right-hand corner of your D2L screen. Okay, it should have a little red dot on it. Okay, then begin to study for the Unit 1 test on Monday. I will have a review posted in the next, before 9 o'clock, I'll have a review posted. Okay, before I log off here, I'll just quickly show how to get to Kahoot at 8:30. You're just going to go to, on your web browser, you can do it on your PC, computer, at home, or in the classroom, or you can do it on a cell phone web browser. Where you're just going to go to kahoot.it right here. Just go there. It'll bring you to this screen. Then all you have to do is put in the game pin that I give to you and hit enter. Okay, then you'll put in your name. Okay. Okay, thanks.